All right, thanks so much for the gracious introduction and having me here today. It really is special coming to the College of Paramedics, having followed paramedicine in the UK from Canada for a long time, and you've always been leaders around the world for us and the careers. So there's a lot to talk about, so I'm going to move right into this because I could spend 2 days just talking about this topic. It's one of my favorite topics to discuss. What I'm going to do in the next about 25 minutes or so is begin by really focusing this down to a case. So I wanted to help bring you to a situation, a scenario that you can imagine and apply the things that we're going to talk about. I'm going to give you the slimmest, slightest, high-level overview of HumanFactors just to give you a teaser of what it can be about. I'm going to spend the bulk of my time talking about some tools and skills that you can take every day and apply, and that the people that are the team that's in the scenario, the fictional scenario I've created, can apply to save this patient's life. And then, if I have enough time, I'll talk for a few minutes about some of the pitfalls, mostly lived through experience, that you can avoid down the road. So, first thing I'm going to do is the job. And this is a video, all this is fictional. All the pictures in this are, this is actual CCTV footage of an incident, but none of the names are real, none of the patients are real, none of the team members are real. And if you see yourself on the screen in one of the photos, I apologize, they're all just borrowed from the web. This is a little bit shocking, but this is to focus your mind on what this team is about to deal with. So this is the scene the team is responding to right now. The bystanders just picked up their cell phone, they've dialed 999, and the crews are being dispatched. But let's give this patient a name so it becomes real to us. So we'll call this person Bruce Wilkinson, and you can put any name or face on this of a patient you've probably seen in the past in a scene that you've been to. But Bruce right now has a traumatic brain injury. He's suffering from impact brain apnea syndrome. He's stopped breathing, and he's in a very serious situation. He's suffered major chest trauma. He's got multiple fractured ribs, bilateral pulmonary contusions, and a right pneumothorax. His pelvis is fractured in many places. He has venous bleeding into his abdomen, and he has a right femur fracture. And he has to have critical interventions to save his life. So things that have to be done in the next few minutes are they have to roll him over, open his airway, do some type of assessment to see what's wrong with him, secure his airway, put an eye gel in, start to ventilate for him, give him oxygen, remove his clothes, attach monitoring, decompress his pneumothorax, put a couple of IVs in, give him TXA, give him fluid bolus because he's going to crump his pressure shortly, get him skin to scoop, pelvic binder on, pull his leg, put a KTD on, get him to the MTC all within 35 minutes. Because in 36 minutes, he's going to die and bleed out if all of these things aren't done perfectly. Now, who's going to do this? Well, a group of random strangers. So this is the team that's going to respond to this patient. None of them have ever met before today, and none of them know they're about to go on this job. So we have the paramedic in the front there, Sarah. She's just been qualified for 3 months. So she's just new to this. She's packed full of knowledge and skills, but doesn't have a lot of experience. Her partner that day is Tim. They've never worked together before. His regular partner's on leave, so Sarah's been put in on the part-time rota. He's a tech. He has 15 years of experience, but obviously not the same level of skills as Sarah. Also responding to this is an ambulance officer. So his name's Stu. You can call him whatever you want. But he has been a paramedic for over 15 years. He has lots of knowledge and experience and qualified a long time ago. But for the last 5 years, he's been leading projects on care of the elderly and dealing with ambulance offload time. He just came back to the road 3 weeks ago, and he's on an RV or on a supervisor's vehicle responding today. And this is a police officer, Tom. So he's old school. He's been around for 20 years. He's passionate about his job, but still kind of believes that his main role is to catch the bad guy. And this team has to do all of these things, or Bruce dies. So we're going to segue just for a minute and talk about HumanFactors so you can understand how this underlies all the rest of the skills I'm going to tell you about. So change your mind. Go back to World War II. The Battle of Britain is on. we're trying to defend, or you're trying to defend the country. We need new air crew. So young men by the hundreds are being sent to Canada and the US to train to become pilots. And while this is happening, they're actually having more people die in training accidents in North America than are dying in the Battle of Britain. And why is this happening? This is happening because of a very simple factor. There's two levers next to the pilot seat that they have to pull at different times. The right one is for the wheels, or the left one is for the wheels going down. The right one is for the flaps going down. When you're landing and going slow, what you want to do is put the wheels down so you can land. What you don't want to do is pull the flaps, so the flaps come back in, the airplane will stall, crash, and everyone will be killed. And that's what's happening again and again and again, because they have these two identical levers. So one day, one of the flight instructors, out of frustration, says, I've had enough, goes into the engineer's shop, kicks a wheel off of one of the toolboxes of one of the engineers, takes it, sticks it on the end of one of the knobs, goes back, takes the other knob off, gets a piece of wood that's wedge-shaped, kind of like the flaps, sticks that on the end of that lever, and almost instantly eliminates any further crashes due to this error. To this day, modern aircraft still use the same symbology for which is the lever for the wheels and which is the lever for the flaps. That is human factors. So it's one of my favorite stories about how human factors can influence patient safety and safety environment. And what it is that it's how we as people interact with those things around us to allow us to perform, because there's certain things that humans do really, really well, but there's other things we don't do that well. And we can change and adapt our environment and the things around us to help us perform better. The thing I really like about human factors and what makes me so interested in this topic is that it's all about humans. It's about us. It's about people. It's about understanding how we do or why we do the things that we do in certain circumstances. And this is where I always remind everybody, contrary to some beliefs, I am also human. So I am fallible. I will behave in the exact same way that almost every other human does. So if we end up on a scene someday and I'm doing some of the things that are typical human behaviors, even though I've learned so much about this, use the skills I teach you to help nudge me in the right way, because there may be days where something's dwelling on my mind from home and I'm not paying as much attention as I should to the things that I'm doing, because I'm human and these things happen to me. But that's what makes this topic fascinating and makes it what applies to everyone in this audience. So human factors is a diverse topic, and again, it should be a whole lecture just about this one slide, but it's all the ways that we interact with each other. It's leveraging the things that humans do well and compensating for the things that we don't do well. A second topic that's related and based upon human factors is crew resource management. Crew resource management was first developed in the 1970s out of a joint commission that the US government commissioned the US Navy, and those of us in the Air Force will question why the Navy, but anyways. So the US Navy and NASA to get together and try and solve this problem, the number of commercial airliners they were having crash when you had perfectly functioning aircraft going into the ground. And they recognized that it had something to do with more than just the engineering here. It had to do with the people. And the things that they focus on in crew resource management are communication, leadership management, cooperation, situational awareness, and most importantly, decision making. And they went beyond that, and they also said, well, what are the things that influence this and how people behave? And a lot of these things come down to things like culture, in particular organizational culture. So the talk we just heard was exceptionally germane to what we're discussing today, because what you work in, the field that you're in, the things around you, a number of these influences will impact how you behave as a human and how well you're going to be able to act to save Bruce's life. All right, so that's the background. In terms of the skills, I'm going to give you 17 tools you can use when you leave this room today. So the first group focus around self and individual things you can do to prepare, any one of the members of that team that are responding to Bruce's incident can prepare or can use. The second group are team skills or team factors, so how to influence each other and how they work together. The third thing are factors related to the environment, and the fourth are some around the systems. I'm just going to gloss over a lot of these things, but a colleague of mine in Toronto, Chris Hicks, who's written an excellent paper about this, and it encapsulates a lot of what I'm about to say. So, and I can make these slides available afterwards if you want the references. The one thing that I'd like everybody to leave this room today understanding is that the most important piece of kit that you can bring to this scene to help save Bruce's life, and that team can bring, are their brains. Not only just their brains, but in particular their cognitive performance and their psychological state. Not only do I want you to understand that this is just a piece of kit, but like any other kit that you carry in your ambulance, you can read about this, you can learn about it, you can study it, you can practice it, and you can train using this piece of kit to get better and better in how you use it every day when you go to work. The last thing I'd like people to leave here today doing is to never accept, again, a statement such as, oh God, that job was a train wreck. Everybody was maxed out, and we just couldn't get anything done. You shouldn't accept that any more than a colleague walking up to you and saying, oh, we had this patient in VF. All 5 of the defibrillators on the scene failed. Because that piece of kit failing is no different than this piece of kit failing on a scene. You have the same ability to control that and influence this kit as you do the defibrillators that you carry. So, level of arousal. This table over here just suddenly got interested in the talk. Unfortunately, I'm not talking about that type of arousal. So I'm going to talk about this stress curve, and in particular the ideal performance state. So what you have here is performance along the one axis and stress along the other axis. And I think we all know that just the right amount of stress, just a little bit of stress, is important to get the best out of us. Because if there's too little stress, you're distracted, you're not paying attention, you have no oomph to go. But if you get too much stress, you're going to start to have a degradation of your performance. This we often nowadays talk about in terms of bandwidth. And this is sort of the application of that model to how we respond. So across the top line, you have heart rate as an indication of your physiologic response to bandwidth. And then you have the different levels of stress and bandwidth. So in the far right of the screen, your left, screen's right. So in the far left of the screen, what you have is you have a ton of bandwidth. So there's no stress, and what happens is you're sluggish, you don't lack attention, kind of like people in the back row of the talk right now. They're daydreaming and wondering about other things. The brain's doing stuff to try and occupy you because it needs a little bit of constant stimulation. The next thing you have the optimum performance. This is when you're in the zone. This is when you can intubate, cannulate the other patient at the same time, juggle 3 babies all at once, and you are a master of paramedicine and performing in the ultimate state you possibly can. But it doesn't take a little bit more just to edge up that stress a bit, and then you start to get just a little bit of the nerves. Your fine your fine motor skills are not quite the same as they usually are. A touch more, and then you're getting the red mist. This is when that person came up to you and they were in your chest about something, the firefighter who's not going to, well, we're taking the roof off, and you're starting to see red. So at that point, your skills and functions are really deteriorating. After that, then you start to get into the final phase, which is your bandwidth is very narrow now, and you're into, your brain is trying to compensate. So you can't deal with any more inputs. So it starts to block things off and say, okay, you're going to get tunnel vision, peripheral vision goes, auditory hearing goes. So, it was on one job that one of my colleagues in the room will remember well of a double fatal pediatric dog attack. And some people on that scene, when we got back and were debriefing, couldn't hear the dog. I definitely heard the dog and remember vividly everything about that scene. And just hearing the dog, I had a picture in my mind, big dog, angry dog, clawing at the back of this door, was definitely there. But other people started to have their bandwidth narrow and had no idea there was even a dog there. So they had started to get into this auditory exclusion phase. And the last pit is just like when your bandwidth goes on your internet, things just stop. So you get the spinning circle of death, and nothing's happening. People freeze up. Some people run away, but mostly they just freeze. And this is when you've gone to black. And this is when people have completely decompensated, your brain shut down, things aren't working. So how do you try and manage this? And this is where the tools come in. So one of the first things that we understand is that how you perceive this situation, this threat or this stress can be very different. Some people can see this as a challenge. It's like, all right, I can take this. We're ready to get this done. Other people see it as a threat. Oh no, I'm a little bit nervous. This isn't going to work out. So you can see it in either way. And how you actually see that depends upon how you analyze the situation. So you have various inputs, sensory inputs mostly, that come in, and then your brain goes, oh, how are my resources and my demands right now? And it's not resources in terms of number of people on scene and stuff like that. It's your cognitive resources. How much bandwidth do you have? Do you have the ability to deal with this situation? Or are you starting to feel vulnerable? Things are getting nervous. If you have lots of bandwidth and you're like, all right, we can do this. I'm good, all primed. We can just tackle this airway with no problems. Then you see it as a challenge. If you're on the other hand, where you're like, all right, I can't really focus, got too much stuff happening, this is really starting to worry me, then you start to see it as a threat. And that influences your physiologic state as well as your cognitive performance. But you can influence this paradigm. So one of the things you can do, and this is one of the things they actually started doing in the military, controlled breathing. So we couldn't have, the generals went, okay, right, we're not having the special forces guys go out there with yoga mats and do yoga when you're in the middle of war. So we had to change the name. We called it tactical breathing, and then they sort of accepted it a little more. But it's really important because it's not called operational breathing. It's called tactical breathing. And the reason why it's called tactical breathing is this is a means to an end. This is something you can do that can help you achieve your goals better than just delivering what you want to do. So they recommend a 4-4-4 pattern. And so everyone can just take a second. We'll do this all together. So it's going to be breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and pause. So everybody breathe in through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice slow out through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. And hold. And just doing that, each one of your heart rates is lowered, your blood pressure is lowered, your cortisol has gone down, and your endorphins have started to go up. So that simple act has already started to give you more bandwidth and physiologically mitigate some of the effects of where you are in that threat-challenge response. When you do this, how long you do it, and the technique you use are all personal and depends on the situation. Some people like to do this on the way to a job. Some people will do it when they're in the middle, things are starting to feel their bandwidth narrowing down. Let me just take a second. Other people like to do it at base between jobs, so you're in that best optimal place. But doing this at any point can be helpful. And this always, people are like, Bruce is dying, and this guy wants me to meditate. But there's a saying that comes up a lot of times in the HEMS world, and that's 10 seconds for 10 minutes. And the astute numbers of you that have lots of bandwidth realize that I just described something that was 16 seconds long, but it doesn't rhyme as well as 10. So 10 seconds for 10 minutes, or 16 seconds for 10 minutes of saved time and effort and energy that you can achieve by doing this. Now, this is one of the things that I actually use a lot myself personally, which is visualization and mental rehearsal. Just like the baseball player or the pro athlete who's run the race before they actually get there, the number of times I have dealt with difficult airways, done thoracotomies, surgical airways, pediatric intubations on jobs that I've been stood down on, you would be absolutely astounded. Because I've often gone through something 3 times in my head on the aircraft going to a job before I even get there. There are lots of different ways to do it. This is a sort of a structured way that you can do this. And you think about the physical environment, imagine the actual characteristics of what you're doing, or the physical features of it. What's the environmental features? What's the smell? What's the sounds you have? What's the actual task you're going to do? And go through it in real time as much as you can, as opposed to sort of super speed. And what are the learnings from it? What are the things you notice? We do this with residents when we're teaching them to do central lines, that if they think through the procedure before they do it, they realize that the ultrasound probe or the needle is out of reach if they have it there. So you learn from it. You move it before you actually do the procedure, and that improves how you're going to do the procedure. What are the emotions you're going to feel? And stay positive. Don't think about, oh, crap, this is going to be scary. Do the, I've got this, I'm calm, this will be fine. Nice, slow, smooth pace, everything will be good. And then do it from a personal perspective. Now, doing this, some people say, but if you go through all this and you've already visualized the thoracotomy before you get there, what happens if the patient doesn't need one? And one of those things one of the answers is that it doesn't really matter. The patient's getting a thoracotomy. No, actually, no. That's not true. But what happens, though, is that it doesn't matter because you're in the zone. So you've now put yourself in that ideal performance zone. You're calm, you're cool, you're collected, and whatever you face, you're better able to deal with, whether you need that patient has that exact problem or not. One of the things in the fighter pilots always say, which I really find interesting, is this never fly where your brain hasn't been before. And I do this a lot in critical care. I live my life in sort of diverging pathways and branches of, if this happens, then we'll do this and this and this, and if this complication occurs, I'm going to do this, and then if that happens, I'm going to do this and this. And I'm always thinking ahead of where I'm going to be and visualizing the path that my patient's going to go on. And that's one of the things that visualization does for you. The other thing is self-talk. Some people find this a little different. So the things like, you've got this, building up statements, you're slow and steady, all that kind of stuff can be very reassuring. But if that doesn't work for you, one of the things that can work for you is actually just talking yourself through the procedure. So Sarah has to do this needle decompression on Bruce's chest. So she's like, okay, come down. I've never done one of these before, but I've read it on the book a lot and done it on mannequins. So second intercostal space, coming along, okay, mid-clavicular line, okay, there's the middle of the clavicle, and I'm going to put the needle in it. It's going to be perpendicular to the patient's chest. I'm going to push down until I get the air release, and okay, that's all great. But that talking yourself through the procedure does two things. One is it helps sort of focus you and keep you calm, but it also allows you to chunk. And what that means is you take a very complex procedure and break it down into small, little manageable steps, and that will increase and improve your performance. So stress inoculation. So this is not taking your trainees and throwing them into horrendous moulages, with like screaming people and cars on fire and police officers in their face. That is not stress inoculation. That, ladies and gentlemen, is entertainment. No, it's not, because that would be bullying, and that would be bad. So what stress inoculation is doing is first taking people and helping them understand their own stress response, helping them go through and see, okay, what is it like when my bandwidth starts to narrow? What do these things feel like? And this reminds me of when in the Air Force, when we were going through a flight surgeon training, we had to go into the hypoxia chamber so that you could understand the senses of what it is when early hypoxia is developing. And everybody's symptoms are different, but they're entirely reproducible for that person. And it's very similar for stress. You can all start to have different ways that we deal with stress. Some people get quiet, some people get more chatty. There's different things you do, but you can recognize your own symptoms of when your bandwidth is starting to narrow. Then you teach them tools like the ones we're talking about today in terms of how to respond to that. And then you throw them into the nasty moulage and let them go through that so they have the opportunity to put these things into practice. That's stress inoculation. Overlearning is something that some of you have probably done. This is where simulation is often used. So that's a repetition of a skill or a sequence of skills beyond initial mastery. And it's also getting something into muscle memory. So I recall when I was in the basic training, and it was our last exercise of basic training. We've been awake for over 24 hours, just put my head down on the cot, finally going to get a few minutes of sleep, and the base is attacked yet again. Hell surprise. So stand to's called, running out to the back of the base, and I hear shots coming from the back, so I go to the back, slide around this corner, pop up, oh, there's an intruder coming in, he's shooting at me, pop off 2 rounds, my weapon stops firing. What do? I flip it over, and you can see the slide is partially open, I must have a jam, I cock it back, flip it over, shake it, hit the release, slam the forward assist, putting rounds down range again. Then afterwards I went, oh, wait a minute, I just had a jam. That was interesting. I just fixed it without even thinking about it. 4 weeks prior, or a couple weeks prior, I would have had to thought about every single step of what I had to do to fix that. But it just happened instantaneously. And that's one of those things where I first really learned about, okay, this is what muscle memory is. When you're sleep deprived, when you're completely, at your weakest physiologic point, you can just do something without even thinking about it. And that is when you start to get muscle memory. But this comes with a health warning. So the health warning is that muscle memory is just like building other muscles. You can get muscle bound. You can get to the point where you're so built up and stiff that you lose flexibility and adaptability. You've learned to do something only one way. And one of the problems with is we call these training scars a lot, is that you do things like you never actually moulage with PPE on. So when you actually do that intubation, you have the goggles on, and you're starting to get a little bit fogged up, it's not the same, you're not used to it. Or you never want to actually use oxygen and waste good oxygen for doing your moulage, so you always just practice with empty tanks. And when you do the real RSI, you forget to turn the oxygen on, because you've never done that when you're actually training. Those are training scars, so you have to be careful with this. Moving on to the team now. So a couple of things to remember, this is a team sport. Bruce cannot live unless his entire team works together. One person will not be able to do all the things that need to be done. So you win by those around you performing at their best. This is what a quote about high-performance teams and all the things that they need to be. But one of the things you need to know is that no one would ever design a high-performance team to do a critical function, for instance, like save Bruce's life, the way we design or the way that you're set to do this task in the pre-hospital setting, where you have no warning, you have no chance to prepare, you've never met each other before, you're in an uncontrolled environment, everything is against you winning. You would never willingly put anyone into this situation and have this happen like this, but if you're trying to design a high-performance team, but this is what happens in the pre-hospital setting. So, one of the important things to remember at the beginning is that everyone comes to this with a slightly different perspective. So everyone has a different sense of good, and this isn't anything wrong. Everyone wants to do their best on scene, but you start from different places. So Tom wants to preserve evidence and catch the bad guy. Sarah wants to take care of the patient, but she's really nervous. And Stu, for instance, he wants to make sure he's got his team safe, and he's called to see if HEMS is available. So everyone has different sort of priorities. You need to get everyone together and to bring them together. And the only way you can do that is by having a leader. So someone always has to fly the plane. Someone has to maintain situational awareness and sort of give the team direction. You need both leaders and followers on any team, and this may evolve over time. Because when you're task focused, when Sarah's trying to put that needle into the chest, she can't still maintain situational awareness and run the team. She may have to hand over that mantle to somebody else. And this can occur from time to time, but you have to have a dynamic situation. And one of the best examples I think a lot of people are getting of this right now are some of the pit crew CPR things that are happening out there. This is how you can organize yourself into teams and have leaders, even if you have lots of people that are at the same level. The other thing you have to do is build shared mental models. And one of the ways I describe this is as a little bubble that goes above the patient, and that it's the leader's job to try and paint a picture there that everyone else in the scene can also see. So this mental image of what's going on, and not only what the scene looks like, but the path that they're going to follow and where we're going with this job. And the only reason that the leader can be assured that the others see the exact same picture is if they get feedback from the other people that they're with about what that picture looks like to them. So they know that they use the information they're giving, they share their thoughts, and they take input from the others so that everyone gets that same picture painted, and they're all traveling along that same path. One of the next things is value-added comments. So I think one of the things that I see often is people don't do follow-through. So you get I'm sure there's a cricket analogy for this, but I don't know it. So in hockey, it's all about, in golf, it's all about the follow-through. So you get non-value-added comments like, the sats are dropping. Thanks. That's not really helpful. It's important, but not necessarily fully helpful. The value add would be, the sats are dropping. Are we in a can't intubate, can't ventilate situation? I think we should trach this or crike this patient. That's the value add, adding that extra bit. SBAR and CUS are two different ways of doing it, but we're running short on time, so I'm not going to be able to delve into those. The last thing, and again, this relates to the last speaker, is about courtesy. So there's good evidence to show that if people are rude to each other, it significantly degrades performance, not just to the person who received the comment, but also the person who gave it and those who witnessed it. So if the first person, when Tim rocks up on scene and says to Stu, "Why'd you park the effing car there, or RV there? I can't get the ambulance in," he's instantly degraded the entire performance of that team and the chance that Bruce is going to survive this. So there's lots of good evidence about this on civility saves, and something we should focus on in the future. Moving quickly forward to the environment, something we can't control in the pre-hospital setting. What we can do is create a little bubble of normalcy that we carry around with us, and I tend to call my happy place. So things that we can do are things like patient positioning. Remember the video? Bruce's head right now is right beside the van. It's going to be very difficult to manage the airway, but when the road is safe, pull him out to the middle, get 360 access, you're much better able to manage this, and that frees up some of your bandwidth because you're not trying to work around something else. How you lay out your equipment, HEMS are super particular around how we create this bubble around us. Crowd control, noise control, planning for how you get out of there. So that's thinking ahead that you're already sort of going where your patient's about to fly, and then having safe, efficient movement on scene. So all these things are things that can help increase your bandwidth. The last little bit that I'm going to talk about before I stop our systems and tools. So this is hard for Bruce, because these have to be in place up front. And you can't put these in place on the scene. And it takes high-level support to do them, to create them. But one of the things they do have at hand at the moment for helping Bruce is they do have a major trauma protocol, and they have their JR Calc and other clinical pathways. So when they're deciding about whether they decompress this, Bruce's chest, Sarah thinks they should do it, but she's never done one and she's a little nervous. Stu, the other paramedic on scene, is like, well, Hems is going to be here soon. He knows Sarah's never done one of these, but it's been like, God, 5 years since he's done one himself, and he doesn't really want to do it, so maybe they should stop. But the patient's pressure's crashing, he's not responding to fluid, he's getting sicker. Sarah pulls out her hot algorithm and says, you know, I think it's the only thing we haven't done yet. We should do this. And they agree. So it can help you get through those difficult situations. I'm not going to talk about the pitfalls because we're running out of time. But I will tell you that if you want more of this information, so if you Google Royal College of Physicians Canada and CRM, there's a free book online that we just wrote. I had the pleasure of being one of the chapters in. And I'll be around all day. You can text me or tweet me, and I can give you a ton of resources on this topic. And thanks so much for having me.